It's time for the Movie Raid Movie Review, and tonight I'm going to talk about The Dark Knight, starring Heath Ledger, of course. And this story and this Batman saga, and we're always used to the previous, like Batman Returns, and so forth, and we've seen different kinds of takes and spin-offs of how we see the upcoming Batman journey that we are always led to be a part of. And I think that The Dark Knight, which is a good introduction to these characters, for those who have not even heard of some of these characters, if they don't read the comics, but in this today's society, we kind of already understood these characters, like, Harvey Dent, but on a different emotional level within this story. For instance, Batman is trying to make Gotham a better place, rid the evil, self-righteousness, and this is where we see the nothing but the goodness of what Batman stands for, and that hasn't changed on that, or let alone like altered in a way, because this is Batman, and we all love Batman. We know what he stands for, and this story, even though it's in modern times, we see that Batman is really trying to establish a kind of reputation, and he doesn't care that Batman is stirring this kind of reputation, even if it's a vigilante style. Even though the police is okay with it in a way, but at the same time they're not okay with it. But Batman is just running around all over the place, it kind of just, in a way, it kind of stirs some damage just as much as the bad guys does. But he does his job, and he takes out the bad guys and throws them in jail, let the police take them, right? Now, with Heath Ledger as the Joker, now this is always a kind of soft ground when anybody who performs as the Joker. Now, we've seen different variants of the Joker, and we've seen different people play as the Joker, but to me, I think Heath Ledger does an amazing job with the Joker on this story, because the Joker is kind of bored with just kind of screwing over the mafia, the mobs, just doing, pity work, basically, at least in his eyes. And that he's very skillful, and he's very, very smart, and he knows how to manipulate people, and he knows the types of groups to manipulate them too. And Batman, he's a different subject to Heath Ledger's The Joker. And the Joker is very intrigued by that. So he intentionally, wants to challenge Batman and wants to prove that Batman is not who he really is, as far as, everybody else is, as far as society goes, because there's always that weak link. There's always the sheep. There's always this strong. But at some point, they're going to be broken, as the Joker says in the film, unless their spirit's broken completely. And that's very agreeable, at least to me it is, because he's trying to prove that not everybody is strong. And you have to break rules in order to justify your actions. At least that, according to how I see in the society of Gotham. And he does make a lot of points as far as, here's a guy who is a bad guy who is, taking notice and getting a big reputation that's skyrocketing on the media, and obviously with Batman. And we see that he says that, if I were to blow up a truckload of soldiers or so-and-so, nobody pays attention. But if he's, it takes a mayor, then everybody freaks out. That's all according to plan. And when the plan or plans that somebody's trying to endure, try to enforce, it's according to the plan. There is no different angles. It's almost like Heath Ledger's Joker version is showing a different angle of a piece of paper. How many ways can you fold a piece of paper before you crumple it? That's how I see it as. And he does such a great job proving his point, or at least a majority of the point, until obviously the end. I'm not going to spoil the end in case you have not seen The Dark Knight. But I will say this includes Harvey Dent as well, aka Two-Face. But we see again, this is modern time period, but in a different story format, that Harvey Dent, who is we see two sides of him already throughout the story. And of course, not just using his coin of chance, but we see that he has two sides of his own argument about what justice stands for. At least, according to him, and how he presents that to the public, and how he tries to, convince Batman. It's like, you can't give in, you can't give up. But we know that to a degree, Harvey, is the more upstanding, reasonable, solid type of morale, or the conscience of Gotham, at least for this, because Batman cannot be that. Batman can be whatever anybody wants Batman to be. I mean, however they see fit. If Batman's a bad guy, they see him as a bad guy, or see him as the outcast, or see him as a vigilante, But that's where Batman is a symbol of hope, a symbol of, the fuel. And then Harvey Dent being the face, the voice, that energy to, create that for the city, for the people. And, the Joker, who creates chaos. I'm a believer in there's a yin and yang when it comes to harmony and chaos. You can't have chaos without harmony, and you can't have harmony without chaos, because one of the two has to happen one way or the other. That's how humanity basically creates that, and basically, and endures it, and can alter it and do it so many different ways. And that's how I see how this story, it's not just about bad guys versus good guys, or there's no real special kind of message like to the audience themselves. This is how they see what society and people in general, how they are to each other, and how as one can perform themselves when it comes to moral choices. What kind of choice would you make, if you were approaching the kind of situations that, the Joker and Batman has been doing, in their past. And I think, it's just amazing when you include three characters, Batman, Joker, and Harvey Dent, in this kind of a battle of wits, battle of emotion, and battle of morale of, which one's going to break first. And, Joker, he loves that, And I think it's a great way of telling the story. Again, I love the fact that this is not a Joker story. This is not a Batman story. This is not a Joker and Batman story. And again, in this story, Joker is not exactly well known except for what he caused after that bank situation and screwing over the mob and whatnot. And then that's when Batman starts taking notice and starts stepping in, and then so forth, tries to stop him and whatnot. But that's the best part about that. And I really can't say anything really majorly negative about this film. I love how it was shot, a lot of great locations, plenty of action. Although I really wished they kind of made like Scarecrow and potentially a few other characters, at least cameo characters, a little bit, have a little bit of a part. I'm not saying they should be a big focus in the story, but I was disappointed that, at least as far as I can tell, like the Scarecrow just had a very minuscule role, and that was it. It was like, here I am and here I'm not. I was a little disappointed, but it doesn't affect my overview about this film. My favorite scene would definitely be the moral choice between convicts and the public citizens, the ones that are high officials and contribute to society in their own way, whether it's their politics or whatever kind of officials that they cater to the city. And so the Joker, that's his game, the game to the people, and let them decide who is going to blow who up. And so Batman himself, races try to stop the Joker from doing this. But I love the fact that, Joker sets these games up intentionally. It's just like the scene where Batman has to choose between Harvey Dent or the love interest between Harvey Dent and Batman, or aka Bruce Wayne. But I feel that this story is honestly one of the better stories that I've seen in a long time as far as a Batman journey type of story. Now, I love Batman, and I love Batman Returns. I thought those were great films, and they cannot be, overlooked. They cannot be beaten, in my opinion. They made their mark, and there's no doubt about it. But like, we see Batman and Robin, and Batman Forever, and there's a lot of nostalgic, some nostalgia to it, to a degree. And there's plenty of action. Of course, you got Batgirl and whatnot, but it didn't capture that kind of essence between the actual connections between the characters. It was just chaos and silliness and this and that. It was just busy, and it's not like not like the actors that portray these characters or how they portrayed these characters. The fact is, like, for example, Batman Forever and Batman Robin, it's like, man, the characters are so cartoony and cartoony comic booky, not actually involved between the characters. This one, Dark Knight, I think, really matches the quality of what these characters do, and a little better of an understanding what kind of level they're coming from. And Joker being a pinnacle character in the comic world, most iconic villain, if not the most iconic villain, and we know there's a lot of them out there, just like Batman being a very most iconic character in general. We see that, Joker in this story, really likes to make an example of things. For example, when he mentions about the money, on the ship, it says, he takes about half the money from the mob, and, as far as the so-called bounty on Batman, which he ends up taking the money regardless anyway, right? And he goes, well, I'm only burning my half, He goes, all you care is about is money, And he says, everything burns, I mean, there's a lot of quotes in this movie that I think is very influential, even in today's public standards, in my opinion. Now, I mean, you could take it toward politics, or you can take it toward how people as humanity, or in a societal sense, how they react to things. And to me, I think that's a good way of seeing things. Just taking examples from this movie, between what Heath Ledger's Joker version and seeing how he represents this character, and how can he get under Batman's skin, And I think it was a good connection and compatibility within this story, But like, if I were to rank this out of a 10, I'm definitely going to rank it a 10 out of a 10, because first of all, the story is really good, very solid. You've got Harvey Dent, you've got the Joker, you've got Batman. You don't have all this extra yada yada and high octane kind of action involved with this. Now you have good action involved. I mean, we get to see a lot of cool stuff. We get to see, the Batmobile, obviously, and we get to see the Bat bike, right? I almost said Batmobile bike, but we see some cool toys involved with this, and I kind of would have liked to see more about that bike, though. A little bit more stunts with that, but that's okay. But I just love the action involved in this film too. I mean, it's got good quality of action, and it doesn't overdo it, because even though this is a comic book type of film in a way, based off these characters, we see that oftentimes, you get ridiculous amount of action that's really not necessarily, like it's too climatic. I like some anticlimactic, and to me, for this story, it fits it very well. And not just praising Heath Ledger. I mean, I think everybody did a good job within this film. And not only that, I also want to praise Hans Zimmer's score on this film. Excellent work with it and very good quality. And it matches the moments, and I just love it. Joker's theme, and I just love that creepiness, and it matches it very well. But like, also to point out, as far as the Joker character itself in this movie, and Batman as a character, now I mentioned about the emotions and the kind of level where they're coming from, but like in comparison to any of the Jokers and the Batmans, this is where I think they both match the levels between their both personas, their egos, because they're opposite, but they're also, in a way, entwined with each other. Just like the Joker said, "You complete me." He doesn't just do this for a joyride. He really, without Batman being a big part of this, again, he would just be a nobody, and this is what kind of boosts his influence of making something bigger than what his original plan was. So, I just absolutely love how the Joker, reacts to things and how he plans things. And we all know that the Joker is obviously the most devious, most mischief, and most dangerous. Well, at least toward Batman. He's a dangerous character in general, but we get to see the kind of maniacal and diabolical mind that Joker can really do in the story, including taking Harvey Dent, who is, at least before becomes what we see as Two-Face. We see what he can do with some of the most purest goodness of a person's character, and morph it into something else and make it worse than what he is intended from. So yeah, I mean, definitely a 10 out of 10 for this film. I think it's a great Batman and Joker film. Again, I say that this is Batman and Joker, not Batman versus Joker per se. This is a variant, and I think it's just a great movie on its own.